Thank you for having me today. I want to start by introducing the group of us that cover crime and courts at the News Tribune, because we really work together, and I didn't tell them I was doing this, but I think that their faces and names should get out there too. Adam Lynn is in the middle there. He is our courts reporter, so you'll see him down in the County City building most days. And Stacia Glenn is the daytime reporter, so she is up at 4:30 in the morning every day, listening to the scanner and bringing you the news that's happened overnight and in the morning, and then she hands off to me. I want to start by talking a little bit about where we get stories from. That's the question that people ask the most often, I think, is how do you find stories, crime or otherwise, that are going on, and what do you choose to write about? So there's a whole bunch of different things that influence that. Mostly, it's this. I have my Twitter pulled up every day. It's actually how I was found to speak today. And when we are increasingly tied to our desks and having to work in the office to get more done and don't feel that we can be out reporting as much just because of the nature of the job and the staffing levels, this is a way that we are able to stay connected with the community, and a lot of people reach out to us on there to say what's going on. A lot of times it's quick questions saying, hey, what happened here? Or I follow a bunch of people in Tacoma and we'll see them talking about things. Yesterday there was a woman who was in a car accident and said that it was a bad hit and run that her husband was injured in, and I happened to see that. I'd never spoken with her before, but I reached out to her and said, would you mind giving me a call and talking to me about that? I wouldn't have otherwise had any idea that that accident happened. So it's always better to be able to make those connections in person, but if we're not able to, this can be a great first step. So other ways, email, we go through a lot of court records that we'll find information from. We watch the TV news stations pretty diligently, and a lot of our story ideas come from them. People do actually send letters to the newsroom still with story ideas and things that are going on. And a lot of times people will call to ask about things. Probably the most important way, though, is that after writing one story about something, that tends to lead to others. And so starting on a topic one time, you will probably get a lot more stories down the road from that one article. So I would say that's where most of my stories come from, is that I've written about something before and either found something else interesting in the process of doing that, or someone read that story and then had other ideas for me because of it. I'm not going to talk too much about the process of crime reporting, just because I think that it's the stories themselves that are the most interesting, so I want to get to some of those. But some of the important parts of the process now for us are that we're always online first. And so there's a push to quickly get a story up online, even if it's not complete. So our job is to write maybe just a paragraph or two. I've written as little as maybe 2 sentences and posted it, and then follow up on it. People have shown us that they really want to know, as we are getting information, they want to be updated fact by fact. They don't want us to wait till we have the whole story to put it online. And that's difficult, because the faster you go, I call it running with scissors, is if you have a crime that's developing and you're reporting on it, getting your facts right quickly is difficult. And the faster you go, the bigger chance for error you have. So it's a matter of balancing that. You want to get the information, you want to be the first, but you also need to get it correct. And so also balancing that with the print paper is difficult. So we'll be posting stories online, but that might not necessarily be the same version that we see in the paper the next day. In fact, there's a lot of things that go online that will never make the paper, or you might see different versions between the two. We maybe won't even post our final print product online in the end, because they're different mediums and different formats. And it's really no secret that slowly but surely everyone's taken a step back from the print product. So we're really in the middle of a transition right now to figuring out how we're going to be able to continue providing the news and existing without having as much reliance on that in the future. So part of the nature of the changing news is that everyone does a little bit of everything, whereas before your crime reporter might cover exclusively crime, I think you'd be hard put to find a crime reporter these days who doesn't do a little bit of everything. I really see myself as more of a general assignment reporter, and that while one day I might be writing about crime in courts, the next day I could easily be out at a school covering some community event going on there. And I like that. That's fun. That's part of what makes the job fun, is that every day is a little bit different. Crime reporting specifically, some of the things that we have to think about are when we name people. So if you are suspected of a crime, we don't name you generally until you have been formally charged with it. And that is because even if the police have said that they've arrested you because you've committed a certain crime, we like that extra step of knowing that a judge or someone in the court system has reviewed that. And so it's an extra layer of making sure that you haven't had some sort of mix-up or there hasn't been a misunderstanding, and that's our standard. One, I think, good example of why we do that is that there was a set of twins that were accused of a robbery the other month. And the police had a very difficult time sorting out which twin it was, which was which. And they went back and forth a few times and had one in jail for a while, and then it was when the mom called in to say, actually you have the wrong son, that they realized that they had gotten it wrong. But there's so many different things that can influence that. We like that extra level of security of knowing that it's been reviewed before we put someone's name in the paper. Also, if someone has died, we need to be aware of family notification. We don't ever want to be the first ones to tell the family that someone has passed away. That's not something we're ever trying to do. There's been a few cases where unfortunately that has happened, but we always defer to the medical examiner and police to tell us, has family been notified yet? Because that's very important to us. Also, there's a responsibility putting someone's name in the paper, in that if you're saying that someone has been charged with a crime, we need to remember to go back and follow up and say whether or not they've been sentenced. Because charges get dismissed, things happen, and we don't ever want to be leaving someone's name out there without following up. And in practice, that's difficult. There's a lot of crimes that happen, and it's difficult to track all of them through the court system, but we certainly do our best. So again, as a crime is developing, we're reporting and posting things online. There are several different ways that we can be getting that information. Depending on the crime, sometimes we might be out at the scene. We might be behind the police tape talking to officers as they're there at 2 o'clock in the morning as things are going on. Sometimes we're at our desks and we're talking to them on the phone. The different people that we talk to will be police officers, firefighters, and we usually have specific representatives of the department that are public information officers, and they are able to sort of be a conduit to the information. The average working police officer is probably not going to want to talk to a reporter directly. That takes a lot of trust, and it's certainly understandable why they would want to go through someone with more training with the media and the public information officials. But the best stories also come when we are able to get to the people who are on the front lines actually doing that work. That's just difficult to do and takes a little bit of extra time. But a good deal with the online first requires being by a computer. So when I'm out in the field, if I'm in a crime scene, I'm not sitting at my computer reporting. And so more often than not, the editors would prefer that I'm at my desk doing a quick write-up on what's going on and then going out into the field to do it. So a lot of my work ends up being on the phone. But when I do go out, it's always very interesting. I like being out in the community. And one thing that lets me do that is they've set me up with a laptop, a wireless hotspot, an iPod, all sorts of things. And so I kind of have a mobile newsroom wherever my car is at. I think that's enough for process, and I want to get into some of the stories now. And you'll see a lot of these don't have any elements of crime. Some of them maybe have bits and pieces of it. But I think you'll really get a sense that not everything that we do on the Crime and Breaking News team has to do with crime or breaking news. This is a recent example, and I think it shows how we follow a story. So this was the man who was fatally shot by Lakewood police officers last month. And the first day, the way that I was tipped off to the story is I saw that one of the TV stations was tweeting about it. They had somehow gotten a hold that it had happened. So the first thing that I did was to call the public information officer. And I waited for a little bit and hadn't heard back from him. And so then I decided to drive out there myself. And the first day, there wasn't a lot of information. We knew that he had been shot. We knew later that day that he had passed away. But we didn't know a whole lot. We didn't know the names of the officers or exactly what had happened. And it's not unusual for them to not give all that information at once. We're used to not maybe having every piece of the puzzle that first day, but we put everything that we do know online as quickly as we can and then flush it out as much as we can for the print product. And then we followed it up until just last week, or this week, excuse me, it was Monday, that the police had a press conference and released more about what had happened. They had the officers' names and had further details about that. And so I think it's just a good example that one story for us is probably going to be, maybe 5 or 6 stories down the road. And the next time that we'll be visiting this, I would expect, would be when the prosecutor makes a decision as to whether the story was justified. So we could easily be following something like this from April to October. This is one of the stories that's kind of stuck with me. There's individual people that I think that you sort of remember. And for me, this little boy was a toddler who ingested methamphetamine and died. It was in December 2012. And we didn't get any word of this. We didn't hear that he had died. We didn't have any information about it until a family member called. And a family member said, I'm really upset that this happened, and I think that someone needs to be held accountable and that you should write about it. And we agreed that it's something that we needed to have in the paper. But it started with us following up the toxicology results with the medical examiner. And those don't happen right away. So it's us calling every week for several months before they even confirmed for us how this little boy had actually died. And then a year after his death, still no one had been charged in the negligence of letting that happen. And so there was no definitive answer to where this methamphetamine came from, who was supposed to be caring for the child. And the state Department of Health and Social Services released a report during the year about what they had seen that had happened. So we wrote about that while also hitting on the fact that a year after this little boy had died, there were really no answers in terms of charges. And then it was just in July that his mother was actually charged and is now in prison. And I think that the charge was manslaughter that they ended on. But that's another example of how, almost 2 full years of following that case before we were done writing about it. This is another recent example. This is the Bonnie Lake family that died when concrete from a construction site on State Route 410 fell. One of the questions that's still trying to be answered now is what happened at that construction site that allowed this concrete to fall. And so one of the recent stories that I've done was looking at this about 100 pages of police reports or so, seeing what the different theories are and what the interviews were with the people at the site and what may have happened. And there's still a lot of questions there, but I picked this story in particular because this was about the vigil. So another part that we do, we write about these horrible things that sometimes happen, but we also really want to write about who these people were during their life. So not just writing about their death, but writing about their lives as well. And it turns out these two were youth pastors in a local church. And there was a vigil that they had there, and we were able to attend and to talk to the people who knew them best about the work that they did and what was important to them. And I think that those stories people really appreciate. I mean, they read the stories about the crimes themselves, but these ones really build trust in the sense that if people read these stories and see sort of how we can honor those who have died, I think they're more willing to talk to us when they themselves maybe are in that position. This is Johnny Green. You might have seen him at the Tacoma Mall. He's known for his brightly colored suits. And he preaches at the Tacoma Mall. He's just an informal, it's completely informal, but he feels very strongly about his religious beliefs and wants to share those with people. And there's many people in the community who absolutely love him. He fell on hard times a couple years ago, and there was a community fundraiser that raised probably about $5,000 for him over the span of a few days. It was a lot of money very quickly because people recognized him and they wanted to help. And he had, at the time, didn't have a place to live, so they wanted to support him in that. And we wrote that story about the community campaign for him. And then we followed up. We got a bunch of calls from people concerned about the fact that he was getting money, and they expressed concerns about his past activities and money management skills, and were just worried that that money wasn't going to a good home. So we followed up and asked, well, what was it used for? How is that money helping him? It turns out he had sent about half of it to Christian television networks. He wanted to do that. He had bought a few more suits with it. One thing that people had also been telling us is that he had about $20,000 worth of back child support that he hadn't paid. And so we had an honest conversation about that too, and we put that all in another story. It's an example of a very complex individual, and this is the most recent contact we had with him. He auditioned for America's Got Talent, and so we happened to be there, and the story wasn't about him, but the photographer just happened to take a picture of him, and Johnny gave me a call the next day, and he always sends thank you notes every time he talks to a reporter or a photographer. So that's an example of, this is not a crime story, but that did take looking up different court records and things like that to pursue. And I think it was a very well-read story. I think whenever there's figures like this in the community that people see a lot, they like reading about them. They like knowing who they are and what they're about. When the Philippines suffered the typhoon a few years back, we found local Pierce County people who had relatives over there that they were worried about. And this is a Google map that I put together where they had their relatives send photos as they were able. And so we were able to pinpoint different spots and then also track where the relatives were going. So they would tell us where they were traveling to find food and shelter, and we could show that on the map as well. And that was, in the wake of disasters like this, people want to know how to help and where to donate, and I think that hearing directly from the families about what would help them and what they think would be best can be a good way to do that. And telling people stories like this during disasters, I think, also brings attention for the need for donations, and so people who maybe wouldn't otherwise think about it, when they have a local person they can connect to, I think that is helpful. I'm from Alaska. This is a Norwegian couple who happened to fly through Seattle on their way to Alaska, where they are living for 2 years and racing the Iditarod while also studying at a university there. And they happened to stop at the Lakewood Ford dealership, which was the only car dealership that would come and pick up them and their, I think, 18 sled dogs at SeaTac Airport. And so I had a whole lot of fun going to Lakewood and seeing the dogs and meeting the couple. But then also we got to follow up with them as Yvonne, the blonde here in the front, actually raced the Iditarod last year. And so again, we put together a map of all of her stops with the pictures she took. And I actually haven't followed up to see how she did this year, but she did race this year as well. So that's just a fun, quirky story that we wouldn't have to do. It's not technically our local story, but it's fun and people liked it. And I liked it. This is another example of follow-up that I think is really important. This is a little girl who was paralyzed from the neck down after a crash near her Eatonville house on New Year's Day a few years ago. And initially, all we had was about the accident, and we knew about it because the State Patrol sends out accident reports. And so we just knew that a family injured, but we didn't know what had happened. We were able to connect with the family at the hospital a few months later and get to know a little bit more about them and what they were doing, and also sort of help influence donations, I think, for medical bills. I think people could read about what that money would be going towards, what sort of therapies, and we just updated on this story in particular was a lot about the fact that the family was in separate hospitals for months. And so Mackenzie, the little girl, was in Seattle undergoing treatment while her parents had to be here in Tacoma undergoing treatment for their own injuries. Her little brother wasn't so injured, but at the same time he was living essentially without his parents for a while. So just this incredibly heart-wrenching accident that has happened, and we've been able to follow up and see all of her progress since then. And most recently we went and spent a little bit of time with her at her elementary school and got to see how she does recess now, how she does reading and math. And people really like these updates. I tell the family again and again, every time I write about you guys, people just say thank you so much. I always wondered how she was doing. And that's, again, this crash happened in, I think it was 2013 or 2014, and it's a family and an incident that we're still writing about and following up on. This is one of the longer term pieces that I've done. There are emergency alerts that we get on our cell phones for different reasons. It's a national system that can send alerts for severe weather or disasters. It sends amber alerts. There's a couple different things about it. It's a system that's had a lot of bugs in the first few years it's been used. And so we went through, there was a couple days when it was just gorgeous and sunny outside, and people got alerts about blizzards on their phones, and we're very confused. And some of the amber alerts just go off again and again. It sounds like it's sort of a mini siren on your phone, and people were getting them like 30 times in a day. Sometimes even after the children had been found. And so this story that I did, I tracked, I would ask people a lot of times on Twitter or Facebook to report to me when they had errors in the system, when they got these repeated alerts or bad information. And I tracked that for about a year and wrote a story about it. I wrote about the mistakes that had happened with it, and I wrote about all the children that had been found and all the disasters people, the true disasters people have been notified of. And that's just something that you don't really think about. You kind of think about it as an annoying alert on your phone, but again, people want to know where that comes from and why. And hopefully it put a little bit of pressure on looking at that system and maybe how it could be better. This is the mayoral recall that I talked about. This is the former mayor of Pacific. His name was Cy Sun, and I was our Pacific beat reporter for a while. There's something like only 90 residents of Pacific in Pierce County. The rest are in King County, but it sits right on the line. So it's sort of borderline in terms of being our territory of coverage. But when all of their controversy was going on, he fired most of the employees at the city while he was there, and there was all sorts of things going on. But that was, I don't delve into political coverage too much, but that was, again, one thing. Everyone wears lots of different hats these days, so they put me on that. And that's one of the more interesting issues that I've been able to cover, just because we don't see recalls very much. So I'm learning about how that process works, what that looks like in the courts, and appeals-wise was quite fascinating, actually. This is a little video that I want to play. I read the story just the other week. This is an African Watusi steer, and he is a pet in Parkland. His owner passed away earlier this year, and his wife was worried that she wasn't going to be able to afford to keep him because he's expensive to keep and she had so much going on. And so she started an online fundraiser just to see if she could get support, and people just poured in with donations and voluntary vet care and things like that. There's a 4-H club that's going to come and help her take care of him. His name is Chief, and people just love this animal. He's like a community fixture. So I'll just play a little clip of him.
Well, he's been just a neighborhood icon, and he's just like a pet dog. Bob got him as a calf, raised him right here on the farm, and he's went through, let's see, when Bob died, he didn't eat for about 2 weeks, and then when Jason died, he didn't eat for about a week, and he lost weight. And I was getting kind of concerned, so we had the vet out, and but now he's putting on all the weight back.
Deal with him. I mean, do it.
So again, that was a fun story, and people like reading about those. It's easy to get crime coverage heavy. I think there's lots of bad things that happen, and we have to write about all of them. But I think it's important to write about stuff like this too. People appreciate that break, I think. I've done a little bit of work in terms of immigration reporting, not much, but one of the areas I've been trying to delve into more is the Northwest Detention Center on the Tacoma timeline. And their contract is in the process of being looked at. So, again, completely different than the crime aspect of things, but when we're writing about different detainees there, a lot of times we're pulling criminal records, so those skills are kind of universal, I think. And this is my contact information. So the last thing they'll ask is that you keep track of that. I'll leave a couple of business cards too. If there's anything going on in Pierce County that you think we should know about or write about, we want to know. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We can't write about everything all the time, but we always appreciate getting a heads up about it.